Here we'll be looking at investment trends in PropTech. To moderate, I would like to welcome to the mic the Managing Director for Asia for the DOE, Belinda Esterhammer.
Hi.
Oh, you're right behind me there. Hi, Belinda. And please give a very warm welcome to our panel for the day, Undivided Ventures founder Alex Bent, Investment Lead for Swire New Ventures Angela Chan, Head of Growth Equity Director at Gore Capital, Herbin Co., and Growth Principal for APAC for JLL Spark, Carolyn Trickett. Thank you so much.
Welcome everybody to this panel, Investment Trends in PropTech. Welcome also to our virtual speakers, Carolyn and Herbin. Can you hear us? All good? Great, and welcome also to my speakers here, Alex and Angela. Let's start with a round of intros before we dive right into this topic, because I know it's been a burning topic, especially recently in the news. So my name is Belinda Esterhammer. I'm the Managing Director of the DOE Asia. We help companies to be more purposeful and innovative. We have a large innovation space here in Hong Kong where we're building a community around a happy and healthier Hong Kong, together with one of Hong Kong's largest property developers, and also really empower NGOs, for example, on supporting and being more innovative within the community. And now I give it to Alex. Can you tell us a few words about yourself and then also, what you're doing, trends?
Sure. So my name is Alexander Bent. I founded Undivided Ventures, which is a platform that invests in companies which are specifically solving for sustainability challenges in the built environment. I come from a hard asset investment background. I started an asset manager about 17 years ago in Hong Kong called District 15, where we work with institutional RE funds. And what I noticed about 5-6 years ago is that real estate institutions and developers were starting to have the conversation about sustainability. And one of the things that I also noticed was that technology is a way in order to scale some of those solutions, especially if you have a global portfolio. So we started Undivided Ventures 2 years ago with a gentleman called Dr. Tim Foreman from Cambridge University, and we're looking at investing in companies, again, that are solving for sustainability challenges in the built environment.
Thank you. Angela?
Hello, thank you for having me today. I'm Angela. I am the investment lead on the venture capital arm of Swire Properties. As many of you may already know, Swire is a very big player in real estate, and we have a very broad portfolio in commercial real estate, in retail, and in hotels. So my team, New Ventures, is essentially the corporate venture capital arm. We have two functions. One is we scout for really good technologies that we could deploy within our business units. And then we have the VC arm where we invest into Series A to C companies. I'm not the biggest fan of the word PropTech. So I would say we invest into real estate related technologies, which could be a lot broader. So anything that run the gamut from construction tech, AR, VR, robotics, operational SaaS, to tech related to retail and hospitality. Early this year, Web3 and Metaverse had its moment. So we also were keeping a close eye on what's out there in the market. And I think that the purpose of our team is really to push innovation forward within the corporation. And I would say that Swire is really the pioneer in real estate tech developments.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Carolyn Trickett. I'm part of the JLL Spark team. JLL Spark is the venture capital fund for JLL, and we invest in small startup companies that have built solutions in the real estate industry. Just like Angela, I'm not a huge fan of the word PropTech because it's a really broad industry. My background, I come from an IT background. Spent most of my career deploying and integrating software applications across a range of different industries. And before I joined the Spark team, I was head of technology for the property management business line for Asia Pacific at JLL. So we deployed a range of different applications around the region, mostly applications that the property managers use on a day-to-day basis to get their jobs done, as well as a data warehouse and reporting platform. So that positioned me very well to step into the Spark team, where we are constantly looking for input from the JLL business about the companies that we're considering for investment. We like to choose companies that are aligned with the services that JLL provides so that we can help them to grow by introducing them through JLL and our network and helping them to get promoted and build awareness within the industry.
Thank you. What about you, Herbin?
Hi, yeah, I'm Herbin. I head up the sort of growth equity platform at Gore, where we essentially invest in, I would say, sweet spot of Series B onwards companies that are relevant to real estate. And just like Angela and Caroline, I guess people don't like the word PropTech just because you don't know how to define that. For me, it's just very simple. Anything that potentially could be B2C, could be B2B, that helps, makes business more efficient. We're there to look at it, and it runs the whole gamut, like Angela mentioned. So the difference, I guess, is that we're not a corporate venture. So even if Gore is unable to use softwares or businesses, I can still be invested because, yeah, I'm a capitalist. But the reverse is it will also be a good value add if we can sort of dog food it to try it, even if you're earlier stage. Because that gives them the runway or gives us the kind of due diligence process to be able to then think about growth equity investment. So we typically write minimum of 10 million up north. And I guess it's trying to solve a gap in the whole, tech scene that's trying to solve the built world because there are many earlier stage founders that we would love to invest into. And the best way at Gore is to try it as a user if they are relevant to any of our portfolio and it goes the whole range from EV charging. In fact, EV charging, because it's relevant to car park management solutions, facility management, the whole range for B2B. But for B2C, then, we can't really help as a user. But if it's something that we're very familiar with, like brokerage, and co-live, co-work, and all those, shared economy perspective or verticals, then it's also a sector that I can look at or my team can look at. And we primarily invest across Asia. So that's kind of like long and short of us.
Great. Thank you, everybody, so much for introducing yourself and also setting a bit the theme and the topic. We all heard about Adam Newman recently raising 350 million for his newest PropTech startup. And where this will go, we will see if there's maybe a WeCrash season 2 happening. But in all seriousness, trends in PropTech and currently what you're investing now, how did you see the landscape change within the past few years? Also, specifically in the past 2 years?
Yeah, I can take that. I think it's quite interesting if you look at how far PropTech has come. I'll use PropTech for the sake of convenience, and where it's been. So I think in the early 2000s, we see a kind of the first wave of PropTech, if you will, tackling the lower hanging fruit. So, you see online residential platforms connecting brokers and buyers, the Zillows and Trulias of the world. And then after 2008, you kind of see the second wave, so the WeWorks, the Airbnbs, where, with the rise of mobile penetration and sharing economy, you see the rise of co-working spaces and short-term rentals. And then right now, I would say we're kind of in the third wave where a lot of the changes were already existing, but definitely accelerated by COVID. For example, touchless solutions, virtual and cloud-based software, very creative property financing solutions, marketplaces. And so for me, what's most exciting in the past 2 years were a few verticals. Future of work for sure, that's up in mind, top of mind for most employers in the world. ESG is a big thing naturally. Construction tech, I think, has been really interesting, especially in Asia, because I think a lot of the companies that we've been looking into in the States and also in Europe, localization is tricky. So to bring their technologies to Asia, it's like a whole different hurdle. So we see a lot more homegrown companies, especially coming out of mainland China. As a developer and as the rest of our panel also attested to, what's really cool, I think, about a corporate venture capital arm is that we can also be a user, right? So we provide validation to the startups, not just in terms of pure capital injection, but through like POC trials and through, again, being a user. So in the past few years, we also have seen, I think, a rise in venture capital being raised by corporates. And this is really critical, I think, in terms of pushing deployment throughout the real estate world and having that ripple effect. And because of COVID in the past few years, you see people caring a lot more, whereas before there was a lot of inertia. You don't have a lot of catalyst. So COVID was the catalyst that I think was needed to push some of these changes throughout.
Well, unlike the other speakers, I don't mind the word PropTech. What I do hate is I hate the word trend and I hate the word ESG. I think that trend is very dangerous because there's a moment in time to invest. What we like to look at is we like to look at companies that we believe have a longer term role within the whole built environment. And I believe that sustainability, we won't be talking about sustainability as an investment theme in the future because every single company around the world is going to have to be sustainable in some shape or form. What we're talking about is investing in solutions that can allow companies, especially in the built environment, which is where we're focused on, to ultimately get there. I think under sustainability, when I just look at our own sort of remit and we talk about, I'm going to use the word, do what Angela did and use a word she doesn't like, I'm going to use the word trend. If you're looking at trends today, everyone talks about climate, but what does that actually mean? Everyone talks about ESG, but what does that actually mean? And I would say the same for sustainability. What does that actually mean? What I think is interesting is the themes underneath that particular horizontal. So when we look at investing, we look at things like biodiversity, decarbonization, climate adaptation, all these thematics which will ultimately be the building blocks to allow the built environment to be sustainable longer term and ultimately get to a real net zero rather than relying on offsets. So that's where we find the most exciting opportunities today. And I think it's still very early days. I think that especially in Asia, a lot of people don't really understand what sustainability means. And I think you're not seeing a lot of companies actually become market leaders in Asia today because there isn't a huge market. I think a lot of people are talking about it, but actual use cases are still few and far between. But I'm very excited for the next sort of 5-10 years when we can actually see that development moving forward.
Have you seen a growth in the past 2 years also within sustainability and the companies that you're investing in?
Yeah, so I mean, we started investing 2 years ago. So that timeline, I've been investing in PropTech since 2013. But as Undivided Ventures, we started investing 2 years ago. And yes, when I first walked into an office in Asia and talked to a developer about what we were doing, they sort of looked at me kind of starry-eyed and square-eyed and just ushered me out of the room. I think those conversations are changing dramatically. I think people want to learn, and I think that's the difference. I think there is a genuine interest in what we can do, what's best of class. And typically when they ask what's best of class, they look to Europe, because that's really where a lot of the innovation is happening today. That's where the regulation is happening. And so we look for a lot of technologies coming out of Europe and how they can actually scale into Asia. But ultimately, I love to invest in more Asian businesses.
Great, thanks. Carolyn.
I think from our perspective, not just within Spark, but also within the wider business of JLL, the biggest shift that we have seen in the last couple of years is not necessarily in the products and the technologies that are being created. It's in the wider understanding of how those products can be used and what that really means. So, we've got a big consulting practice and workplace services practice within JLL, where we've got people working with big corporations to help them adapt their workplace to the way that their employees expect it to be. And the advent of remote working, the massive realization in so many organizations that hadn't considered remote working before, has created this need now to work out how to manage the workspace without having one desk for each person. We were talking about that before the pandemic hit, but I think the shift has been in the understanding of why that is going to be very important moving forward for workplaces of the future, not just in planning and organizing a workspace, but tools that can be used to help people interact better with their workplace, whether it's booking a desk, whether it's knowing how many people are in there, whether it's knowing where the rest of your team is. There's a lot of organizations out there that are building solutions to meet that need now. And it's a need that I think a few years ago felt like there were products that had been created without a real problem to solve. And what's now happened is a realization that that problem, it's not necessarily a problem, it's an opportunity for changing the working environment.
With JLL Sparks, could you maybe share a bit more, and also, if you're allowed to, maybe a few numbers, like how much it has grown over the past 2 years?
In terms of the companies that we've invested in?
Yeah, if you're allowed to, or just generally.
I can share some general numbers. When we first launched Spark, we talked about creating a $100 million fund, which was really more of a kind of a vague marketing line, a target for what we wanted to invest. And as it turned out, we've set up a series of funds over that time. It's been nearly 5 years now. The first funds were well under 100, and they've grown. Each fund is a little bigger than the one before. And when we calculated that earlier this year for a press release, we realized we'd already invested over 340 million. So well above. So we've dropped the 100 million line now, and we've got around 40 different portfolio companies now, and continuing to invest.
Amazing. How many of these are in, how many of these are in APAC?
There hasn't been a big focus in APAC for JLL Spark as yet. We actually made a few investments in the APAC region before the Spark Fund was formed. So they have now kind of unofficially been brought in under the umbrella. And since the Spark Funds were formed, we've invested in QDesk, which is an India-based marketplace for flexible and co-working spaces. And we've also invested in Released, which is a New Zealand-based company that's built a light version of property management and accounting software. So think of a super light Yardi or MRI type of platform for property management. So Release is the first one that we've invested in since I joined the team. So that was very exciting for me to be part of that. And there is definitely a focus now to find more companies in the Asia Pacific region to invest in. There's been a recognition that we need to spread our investments across the globe, and also not necessarily expect each of our investments to be global. We're investing in startup companies. They often don't have the capacity. And someone else also mentioned, there's often a bit of localization. So there's a recognition now that we may be investing in the same type of company in different regions, and that's not necessarily a problem.
Great, thank you. Herbin?
Well, so for us, I mean, we invest a lot in Asia, and increasingly so. I mean, from Greater China, we started from Greater China, and then increasingly so into Southeast Asia. I'm seeing a lot more trends in consolidation in the space. Given, I would say, the last 12 months, valuations has come down, and there are a lot of, fundraising has been hard for a lot of startups. And the way I see it is, increasingly investors and also landlords in particular are actually looking at product market fit, right? Because there are things that are good to have, but not must to have. Vice versa, right? There are things that I'd rather be a user, but maybe not as an investor. And it kind of sounds not intuitive, maybe to some, but to me it's because as investors, sometimes it's whether you're investing for returns or for really just purely doing good long term, right? And in PropTech or in this sustainability space, it's really a long term view that people need to take. And hence what I always tell people is don't expect a quick buck if you're investing in PropTech. But then it's solving a real need, right? So while like just as an example, these days you can start in early 2016, 2017, people are all into like co-work, co-live and all the likes. And these days you're venturing things towards like, build to rent, rent to own, and all these new verticals. And the idea is just simply, to me, is in different countries, there's a little bit of localization, but about Are we actually getting to affordable housing? Are we trying to solve a real need, or are we trying to flip houses and make quick buck, right? Because that's how regulatory is going to be perceived. And when you look at building management, facility services, it's ironic to me sometimes where startups are trying to differentiate themselves by saying how unique their services is, when at the core of it, you're talking to real estate people who wants to understand things in simple terms, and talking in difficult language, something that takes a lot of time to understand, doesn't help in getting product market fit. Some products are very simple, people understand it, they pay for it, and some are just more complicated, which actually means, which could be that they are really solving a real need, right? But actually need customers to understand it. I always urge, like, if you're trying to bring to new markets, might as well just think about finding partners together to harder up. And so good or bad thing, I think the market recently has seen that there's a lot of consolidation in play, because as you harder up, you might find synergistic platforms to come together. And then a few things that we are very big on these days, cold storage is a big thing for us. Simply because at Gore, we know we have logistics, we have cold storage, data center is big for Gore. So definitely I'm looking at technologies or anything relevant that can, be helpful to the logistic data center platform. And obviously this whole energy transition phase, from, if you can even cross over now, maybe we don't even need to talk about prop tech, but grid tech, infrastructure tech, depending on how you define it, to me is all relevant, right? To this whole technology. And so we also look at things like the next generation batteries, battery storage, energy storage. And these are new things that we're all looking into. But that doesn't mean that the old school way of, say, brokerage and all this is not a focus for us. It is still a focus. In fact, Southeast Asia, I think, is unique in the sense that there are ways to leap across, right? You don't have to go from 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0. You can always make the leap 1.0 to maybe 3.0 by streamlining a lot of the things that what people perceive to be brokerage or transactions. And so Southeast Asia is a big market, and I think there are many ways to jump hurdles. And so, yeah, I'm actually spending a lot of time in Southeast Asia these days.
I think Herbin made a good point, and I'm going to say this in the nicest possible way, and I've told a lot of my institutional friends the same thing, but institutions are like sheep. And, data centers are massive right now, so all institutions are going into data centers. I used to invest into residential, and it used to be beds and sheds. That was the big thing, and everyone went into beds. And one of the things that you have to look at when you're looking at prop tech, and I'm going to use that term again, is if you have no idea about how capital flows work within the real estate sector, and you have no idea about how real estate developers and investors think, it's going to be very difficult for you to invest in this space. I've seen it a lot of times before where you've got a lot of people who have come out of, big, long technology histories of VCs investing into tech, but haven't managed to crack prop tech because they're missing one big ingredient here, which is that they just don't understand the sector. And I think that that's super important. And so when you're looking at trends, I think trends is a dangerous word, only because, like Herbin, I'm looking longer term. I think this is a very long-term investment play, especially in prop tech. And so you have to have a thesis based off all the knowledge around real estate that you know, and stick to that thesis. Obviously, you can divert here and there, but there is a thesis, and you have to sort of be true to that, just like people are true in real estate to their investment product. I mean, and those investment products in real estate have quite a long cycle. So I think prop tech has some very unique characteristics that other technology plays don't.
Does anybody want to share some thoughts on that? Thanks so much, Alex. Yeah, feel free to also chime in. And we have also our first question from the audience, which is if you sometimes come across companies in Asian countries, say Japan or Korea or even China, for example, with compelling tech solutions and a business case, but the startup is not really interested in going abroad. Maybe they're feeling that it's too much trouble or effort to leave their domestic market. How do you approach such cases? Where it's really, because we also mentioned localization earlier.
Well, I mean, maybe I can take that. Well, if the startup just don't want to venture abroad, then I can't invest. Simple as that. But that's a simple answer. But the nicer answer to this would be, that it's about finding the right markets for certain business, right? For example, you're trying to do facility service management. Let's say it works in Hong Kong. Let's say it works in Singapore. Let's say it works in certain cities where it's very compact. And now you say you want to get into developing countries where the cost of labor is a lot lower than implementing a SaaS software. It might work in a developed country or a tier one city, but if you count dollars and cents and be practical about it, put yourself in the manager's shoes in a certain city, it's all about dollars and cents, and the cost is lower just to hire a human being to be in front of the building. I don't need to innovate. I'm just being practical. And so when we say localization, this is what I mean by understanding where you should be going. Not just blatantly say you want to cover to put your flags in, basically put a company map in certain flags and just be like, I'm expanding, right? Because at the end, I'm a growth equity. I'm looking at giving fuels to help them to scale faster. Not just to expand blatantly, like, just telling me your price to sales has gone up. And in that sense, it's a lot founder centric, but to echo, to some of the comments earlier is that the founder needs to understand real estate, needs to understand the mindset of real estate landlords, asset managers, facility service managers. Sometimes it's tripartite, right? To get all these approvals done. So expanding abroad, I'm all for expanding abroad because we are growth equity. But sometimes it might involve what I mentioned earlier about consolidation, working with other partners to think bigger, because some of your fellow competitors or your fellow partners who are actually already there for a long time, they want to come to your place, you want to go to their place. Why kill each other? Might as well grow together and be bigger if your solutions are synergistic. And it all boils down to ego. For me, landlords are very understanding, right? If it works in Hong Kong, then you don't want to change. Like if it works in Vietnam, certain solutions, and it's a Vietnamese solution, you don't want to change. But what works in Vietnam may not work in Indonesia, vice versa. But coming together as a common new tool, right, as a total new plan, might work. Again, there's many nuances to that, but I can't force founders to travel to go abroad if they don't want to expand. I think that's the long shot.
I'll add quickly to that. I would agree that if the startup from the get-go doesn't have ambitions to go abroad, that's the limitation of the growth mindset is quite troubling for an investor. As to how they should think about it, I would have maybe 2 points to add to that. One is we've seen a lot of companies trying to do way too much. My advice to startups is start small, think about what exactly the product you're trying to solve, the pain points you're trying to solve, have a killer product in one particular niche, and then expand. Whether it's using that as a wedge to develop a wider product suite, or if you're going abroad, start with an anchor client. I know B2B sales cycle it can be very difficult and very long. So start with an anchor client that can help you introduce you with client acquisition, introduce you to blue chip clients in that new geography, get your feet wet and test the waters a little bit first before you feel comfortable, hiring your own BD team, for example, in that new region. One caveat I would say is that having an anchor client, you have to, at some point, be careful about, you have to feel comfortable about doing your own scaling and weaning yourself off the anchor client, but that's probably for a later stage discussion. And the second thing I would think is for companies, especially, for example, coming out of Asia, real estate is a very localized game. And so they have to have very good R&D, back to everything that we've talked about, the mindset of developers. But I would also say that while there are localization issues or differences, we are also more alike, or developers or users are also more alike than we are different. So I think for founders to do their research well, for example, in terms of fundraising, right? Let's say you're a Series A company and you need to think about what other new geographies to expand into, and you are in Southeast Asia, let's say. The next 100K or 10K sales you make in Malaysia versus the same number of sales in New York would mean very different things for your fundraising trajectories. It would help investors draw different projections for your potential growth, and it would also mean that you could acquire probably very different premiums in your next valuation fundraise. So these things, I think founders would be they would be doing themselves a huge favor by having these discussions earlier on with probably strategics or just investors that know the space well.
Thank you. With the current investment environment and obviously it's harder to raise currently, have you seen companies actually decrease their valuation if they're asking for your funding?
Yeah, we just did a follow-on round into a business recently that was actually oversubscribed. So there's a lot of interest in the business, but all the term sheets they got back were at a valuation of about 25% less than what they were proposing. So yeah, I think you're definitely seeing, I think Herbin mentioned it earlier, right? You are seeing some rationalization in those valuations. I mean, I remember, even 8 months ago, if anyone put climate on the front of a Series A document, they would put 100 million US onto the valuation, and that was it, right? I think those days are definitely gone, and that's not just because of capital markets, that's for a variety of different things. But yes, I mean, we are seeing definitely founders be a bit more realistic about valuations. And I think that's healthy. I think it just got, like everywhere in the world, it just got to a bit of an extreme.
Thank you. You just mentioned climate, and also we know ESG is your most hated word, but I think that it's just unavoidable to also quickly mention around like sustainability or climate when it comes to investments. Is it nowadays for you, you say just a must-have, that it's somewhere in there?
Well, I think there's a carrot and sort of stick approach, right? And when you're talking about real estate, you're talking about regulations and you're talking about tenants' needs and wants. I think there's a convergence now on, at least in some geographies, on both those things. I think Asia, especially Singapore, Singapore's just about to adopt or base their system off the EU taxonomy. So, we'll be seeing changes in Singapore. China has come out with their own system, which is actually, fairly progressive. So I think you are going to see a lot of changes happen in Asia, and I think whether people want to institute this or not, there's going to be a bit of a stick. But I also believe that if they don't institute, there will be a problem with getting tenants in the future and getting sales if you're a strata title, residential developer as well.
Thank you. Question for Angela and for Carolyn. So, do you look more on financial return potential or strategic synergies within your core business when you make investment decisions?
Carolyn, do you want to take that first?
Sure. It is a bit of both, but from JLL Spark's perspective, we won't invest in something that isn't strategically aligned with the services that we provide. So it doesn't matter how good a financial investment it is, if we're not convinced that we will be able to help that company because we'll be using their product or introducing their product to our clients, whatever the scenario is, doesn't matter how good the finances are, it'll still get a no from the investment committee.
Yeah, I would echo Carolyn's point. For us, we have a hurdle rate. We look at IRR. We would not invest into something that is not financially sound, but the strategic angle has to be baked into our investment thesis because we are a CVC after all. But I would say that strategic angle is not like a threshold, right? It's a spectrum. So on the one end, it could be technologies that are immediately deployable, that we could do POC trials right away. And then on the other end, it could be more moonshot projects, right? Things that are potentially disruptive, that potentially needle moving for the industry. So we try, as from Swire at least, we try to be creative about what we consider strategically relevant. Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, something that is relevant and could be value adding to our portfolio is quite key to our investments.
Thank you. We have a question from a startup. So a Hong Kong startup, they're trying to secure the first pilot project or POC, and as we all know, that's really hard in any country. So what tips would you have for a startup like that in starting out in Hong Kong and GBA?
I think, to be honest, good companies in PropTech are just that the criteria for good companies in PropTech are criteria for good companies in general, right? So what I was saying and what all of us have been talking about, product market fit has to be quite established, and you have to be very particular and specific and smart about what you're trying to solve and what business model you have established and you've tried out that works for your particular product. The second thing that we look for is management team. I know that's qualitative, but that really, I think, is the biggest lever in a company's success. What we look for is, a track record in ideally having scaled up your enterprises, somewhere in your background, and also complementary skill sets, right? Like probably not on the same person, but on the same team. You want to have technical expertise. You want to have, especially for prop tech startups, you want to have industry knowledge, right? Domain expertise in the relevant niche, whether it's construction, whether it's retail, whether it's leasing. And then the third is commercialization, right? Sales and BD efforts that could really help the company understand the markets they're trying to attack and what markets expand into. So management team, I think for us, especially for early stage companies, that's a big part that as a CVC, we help our companies focus on quite a lot in as well, helping them fortify the right team at the beginning. And go ahead.
No, all I was going to say is I'll just add to that and just say I think you just need to network like crazy. Because I think you need to come to JLL events like this. I think you need to go to conferences. I think you need to go to InvestHK events.
Get in touch with Paul.
I think get in touch with Paul. I think listen, you can have all that stuff that Angela mentioned, which is super, super important. But if you can't get to the right person, sometimes it just sits in a drawer. So yeah, go out there and network.
Very quick point on that is you got to hustle. And in all ways imaginable, I've seen companies management teams that we really buy, and we've seen them pivot from business model to another business model, but we buy the people. We trust that they can make it work, whatever model that they land on, so.
Thank you. So, because we're coming slowly to an end, what's the one sector right now that you think is oversaturated? Anybody dare to speak? Or should we also phrase it into, you can choose which one you select. Either what's the one sector that you think is oversaturated, or what do you want to see more of?
Listen, I had a co-living development before, so I think co-living is oversaturated. I think that every man and his dog started a co-living development, and every investor wanted to invest in a co-living development. I think that's oversaturated. I don't really understand what co-living means, but that's just me.
I would rather just say almost every sector that you can think of investing, there are a lot of competition, there are a lot of companies that will come out. It's a matter of where the capital is flowing, right? If investors are willing to invest in a certain space, suddenly you have 10, 15 companies pitching the same thing. And just like, to me, energy saving and all the likes is great, right? Institutions need to have that. But pretty much over the last 24 months, all the PhDs are coming out and say they can create an AI software to save energy. And am I a PhD? The landlord's able to verify which AI is better. And the pitch book comes and it's pre-A, right? It's AI. Saving energies. To me, you ask me, but the same thing across, like to go to co-living, right? A few years ago, co-living was hot, right? And just like Adam Newman, right? Co-work and stuff. So then you have a lot of money, a lot of companies coming. I don't think there's a particular sector that is like overflowed with, just you can't pinpoint to a certain sector, but it's just that almost every sector I can see a lot of competition, a lot of quote unquote copycats. And the difficult part in PropTech, or actually in just every business, right? It's the fact that it's product market fit. I keep emphasizing, because sometimes I try to tell founders to try to pivot a little bit, try not to overemphasize how different you are from another software, because technically we just want to see results. Like as a landlord, I just want to see results, because you're not looking for investors, you're looking for users, right? So Just like I go to a hotel, I expect an espresso, but I don't need, the hotel doesn't need to go out to tell people that there's an espresso machine. That my hotel is better than the other hotel because it's an espresso machine, as an example, right? And so why is it that a smart building must, the PropTech company going to a certain landlord is trying to say that this is the best software you can ever find um, to energy save, as an example. So to me, just my 2 cents worth. And then of course, which sector I'm very bullish on is this whole energy transition space. Or I'll say that into code one of the the sustainability, right? Because that's one sector or industry where you see real need to change. Whereas there are in the quote unquote prop tech world, there are things that's good to have, but not a must to have, right? If I want to make my building tenant engagement and all, it's great to have, but is it a priority must where I'll die tomorrow if I don't have a certain tenant engagement app? Not to offend anybody, right? I said, but the reverse is you're seeing floodings everywhere, right? Transitions, there's lack of power here and there, in this country and that country. Now that's real motivation from institutions, from everyone to say we want to focus on that space, right? And you've seen supply chains, right? Batteries, lithium batteries, like so expensive, and EV cars getting all the lithium batteries. Now then, suddenly people are, I wouldn't say even suddenly, but it's natural to think that why can't it be cheaper, or how can I ease this problem, because we all want to transit. That is an intrinsic motivation that doesn't need to even convince the landlord that I should pay for it. It's just intuitive, and that's the kind of sector where I said I want to pursue, right? And it's then it goes deeper to figure out, okay, which sort of space is better, and there are many low hanging fruits even in this space to invest into, and there will be cross overlaps, right? Even in your so-called prop techs of the world, because climate tech, prop tech, infra tech, right? To me, there will be overlaps, and in fact, you might even see consolidation in companies because you might want to offer a lot of overlapping services than just to pitch that your one product is the best. Again, I'm speaking more from a growth stage mindset. Of course, when you're too early, then like Angela was mentioning, you can't be saying you want to do everything, right? So it depends on. I would just urge founders who are very early stages, pick a spot where immediately customers want to pay for it, right? Or money is already there to get in that space. There's enough motivation to not need to try to convince people why you're doing something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Carolyn.
I had trouble when you asked this question. I was nodding and smiling because I had so many different answers I wanted to give. In terms of the products that are coming across our radar at the moment, I think I'm seeing a bit of oversaturation in the kind of data aggregation and reporting space. Everyone's got a better data visualization that they've done that no one's ever seen before. And it's somehow AI powered and no one can understand how. Seeing the .ai at the end of a URL, it's usually not a good sign to me. So that's one area where we see a lot. And I think this has died down in the last few months, but last year I was seeing just how many more tenant experience apps could be created in this world that are almost exactly the same as all the others. So, but I think that we're on the downward slope of that trend now. And I think to Alex's point, we'll probably be seeing more oversaturation in the ESG buzzword, just because there's so much focus globally on net zero targets and trying to be more sustainable. We'll naturally just keep seeing more of those products. That could be a good thing, though. I don't think we've seen the peak of creativity in that space yet.
That's great to hear. Angela?
I would say, I mean, everything everyone mentioned makes a lot of sense. I would say that oversaturation might not also necessarily be a bad thing, because that's where all the money's going. And so the rising tide lifts all boats. There's a reason why capital flows are going somewhere. And so if you're a startup and you want to go in that space, good for you. Like brace yourself for competition. But if you're good enough, then who knows, you might be the winner. And there might not be one winner if the pie is big enough, right? I would say for the sectors that I'm quite excited about, construction tech, I think, has so much room for improvement and optimization. It's if real estate in general has been slow in adopting tech, construction is probably one of the slower even the verticals within real estate. So I'm quite excited to see more innovations coming out of that. And I guess in general, like across all, even for retail, like not just online to offline, but offline, not just offline to online, but online to offline. Because as a landlord, obviously we run a lot of shopping malls. So for me, I'm just excited to see more disruptive business models coming out of all verticals, really. Not so much copycats, but really things that move the needle. And I think we see a lot of creativity in probably other tech sectors more than with PropTech. So beyond the co-work, co-live, all the buzzwords, I would really encourage people, who have the brains and who have the guts, just think a little bit, like be a bit more creative and just daring with disruptive solutions.
That's such a lovely ending to this panel. And we had so many more questions. Sadly, we ran out of time. Before we end, anybody's website ends with .ai in the audience or in the chat? Let us know. But yeah, thanks so much for joining, for tuning in. And thanks everybody so much for speaking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Forward like his selfie.